Lesson 11. Ruth and Esther. Memory text. So it was, when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, that she found favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter. Esther 5 verse 2. This week, we explore real stories that foreshadow end-time events, showing God's perspective, and preparing us to understand future prophecies that strengthen our faith. We will focus on two remarkable women. Ruth, a widowed outsider, whose faithful journey leads to a redemptive love story with Boaz, reflecting Christ's love for us. Esther, a courageous young woman, who rises to a royal position, and risks her life to save her people from destruction. In prophecy, a woman often symbolizes God's church, revealing how he views his people. By examining the stories of these two women, we can uncover valuable lessons from their God-ordained experiences.
Famine in the House of Bread. Critics often cite the world's suffering as proof that God is absent, powerless, or indifferent. The Bible, especially the story of Ruth, shows that God is present and active, allowing human choice, while guiding history toward healing and redemption. The story opens with irony. A famine in Bethlehem, the house of bread. It echoes Eden's lost abundance, where God once provided freely for Adam and Eve. Humanity began in abundance under a generous Creator, but traded that role for slavery to sin. Naomi and Ruth faced famine, the death of their husbands, and deep loss. These hardships were caused by natural disaster and personal tragedy, reflecting the suffering all humanity faces due to a broken world affected by sin. Like Naomi, we've lost the inheritance God intended for us, and life has become filled with hardship. Eden was a gift, but not without conditions. Humans had the freedom to rebel, but with that came the responsibility to sustain themselves. We were created to subdue and care for a perfect world under God's blessing. Instead, we now struggle to manage a broken one. Human selfishness and competition over limited resources cause much suffering. It's tragic, especially since the earth still yields abundance, showing God's continued love. Sin and greed often turn that abundance into conflict. At times, it feels like the world overpowers us, rather than the other way around. Still, there is hope. One day, this struggle will end, and restoration will come.
Ruth and Boaz. Naomi, burdened by sorrow, renamed herself Mara, which means bitter. Like her, we live in spiritual poverty, wounded by sin, and gathering scraps of joy in a broken world. Yet everything changes when we discover this truth: God has not forgotten us. Ruth 2 verses 5 to 20 is pivotal because it marks the moment Ruth meets Boaz, a kind and generous man, who shows her unexpected favor. Naomi's joy at discovering Boaz is the benefactor comes from realizing he is a close relative, a potential kinsman redeemer, offering hope, provision, and possibly restoration for both of them. Naomi needed a close relative to reclaim Elimelech's land. She hoped Ruth could marry one, and bear a child in his name. Christians see Boaz as a symbol of Christ, who became our kinsman redeemer by taking on human flesh, calling himself the Son of Man again and again. Many see God as harsh, letting us into heaven only if we meet strict moral standards, and even then, reluctantly. But Boaz's kindness reflects Christ, who sees us in our spiritual poverty, and still desires us as his bride.
Boaz, as Redeemer. Boaz loves Ruth and wants to marry her, but another relative has the first right. If Boaz represents Christ, then his rival's claim may symbolize Satan's role in the great controversy. Various Bible passages show that Satan claims authority and seeks to test, accuse, or control humanity. In Job 1, verses 6 to 11, he challenges Job's faithfulness, implying humans are loyal only for reward. In Matthew 4 verses 8 to 9, he offers Jesus the world's kingdoms, suggesting he holds power over them. Jude 1 verse 9 shows Satan disputing even over Moses' body, indicating a belief in his right to the dead. Luke 22 verse 31 reveals Satan's desire to sift believers like wheat, showing his intent to shake their faith. Together, these texts portray Satan as asserting ownership, and seeking to undermine humanity's relationship with God. In Ruth 4 verses 1 to 12, Boaz goes to Bethlehem's gate, symbolic of Christ entering the world as our Redeemer. There, elders gather and a sandal is exchanged, marking legal ownership. This scene mirrors a courtroom, much like the judgment scene in Daniel 7. The key point. Judgment favors the saints because Christ, like Boaz, paid the price to redeem his people.
Haman and Satan. In the story of Esther, Haman is introduced as an ambitious man, eager for status and power. He is elevated to a high position in the empire, placed above all the other officials. Haman, like Lucifer described in Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, defies God's authority, and targets his people. This same rebellious spirit is seen, when Satan tempts Jesus by offering him the kingdoms of the world. But unlike Satan, Jesus came to redeem the world as our kinsman redeemer, paying a great price for our salvation. In Revelation, Satan's desire for power leads to Earth's final crisis. Most follow the beast, but those who refuse to worship are met with force. Haman sees that Mordecai, one of God's chosen people, refuses to honor him or give him the reverence he desires. Enraged, Haman sets out to destroy all of Mordecai's people. Similarly, in Revelation 12 verses 14 to 17 and 13-15, John describes Satan and the beast persecuting the remnant, those who keep God's commandments, and have faith in Jesus. Both portray God's people as distinct, and targeted for their loyalty to God, highlighting a conflict between obedience to God, and allegiance to earthly powers.
For such a time as this. Some Christians tend to focus heavily on the troubling parts of Bible prophecy, emphasizing fear and hardship. While it's true that the Bible speaks honestly about coming trials, God never leaves the story there. He always includes a promise of hope and deliverance. Prophecy often follows a pattern. It reveals the consequences of human rebellion, but then points to God's intervention. Though the final crisis, sometimes called Jacob's time of trouble, will be challenging, the promise of rescue is just as certain. In Revelation 12, the enemy pursues God's people, but God steps in to protect them. Similarly, in the story of Esther, a courageous queen becomes God's instrument to save his people. These stories remind us that even in dark times, God is in control and will deliver those who trust him. God places people, like Esther, in key positions for such a time as this. We are called to act courageously when crisis comes. Esther came boldly to the king. Boldness before the throne brings favor. We can approach God with confidence in times of need. God's deliverance should be remembered and celebrated. He will ultimately vindicate his people. Esther 9, verse 28. These days should be remembered and observed, in every generation by every family, and in every province and in every city. And these days of Purim should never fail to be celebrated by the Jews, nor should the memory of these days die out among their descendants.
Thank you for studying with us. We hope you give this video a like, and please subscribe. And always, keep the faith of Jesus.